Hi, my name's Erwin, and this is the Poetry Lighthouse podcast. So, if you like, we could start with the first poem that you're going to present to us.
So I'll start with, I wanted to read a poem from each section of the book. So this first poem I'm going to read is called Morning Glory, and this is a poem from Inhale. Morning Glory. Early November. The sunflower stalks lean like strung out skinny men against the vinyl siding of my house. The knockout roses droop, hungover now, and zinnias sag from too much sun, their yellow perms turned mousy brown. On my way to fill the bird feeder this morning, I've given up on shiny new arrivals. Yet, past the sleepy coneflowers and burnt out beauty bush, a spread of silky, heart shaped leaves drips from the trellis, unfazed by fall, eager to celebrate a few more weeks. I planted the dust-sized seeds in May with tempered hopes for blooms next spring, and today these vines draw me in with their charisma and glamour. I question the tricks of the light in my mind as I spy a blue jewel twinkling at the waistline of the green gown. As I walk closer, I watch this mirage of color change into blossom, glistening. I throw down the bag of birdseed, touch the periwinkle diamond, its golden center glows. I trace the opal star stretched across the ornament of petal with giddiness in hand and heart. My skin tingles joy as I shout to the tired garden party and the cardinals who need their breakfast. Oh my God, it bloomed.
Wow, I love that. And the reading was fantastic. I think you
Oh,
really
okay.
bring out the essence of the poem. This is such a beautiful kind of pastoral, um, you know, calm and peaceful poem, and also really like the whole imagery that you brought into this poem, because I can see you have a lot of birds and plants. Um, some plants that I haven't even heard of before.
Yeah, these are very much like native to Tennessee plants.
All right. There is a part in the poem when you have this jewel and the gown. So I have the feeling that there's something very deep in there. What did you um, envision when you were writing those lines? Is it some sort of reflection or mirroring of the beauty that you're looking at, like in the sort of a garden and seeing the flowers as something precious?
Yeah, so this is actually an example of a poem that is very rooted in an actual moment where I I really had, like very novice gardener, but love to garden, sort of dream of being like a great gardener one day. And I had planted these morning glory seeds in May and was, kind of like wishing that maybe I'd get like a blossom at some point and the rest of the garden was dying. And it was actually I caught, out of the like my eyes caught this sort of blue and this what I describe as the green gown of these and morning glories. If if for those who aren't familiar, it's like these just really kind of decadent looking plants where their leaves are heart shaped and they're this bright green and they're just really sort of like these luscious plants to me. And I was just certain that, I wouldn't have any blooms until November because that's what it said. And I really was like, wait, is it possible that, there's a flower on that vine? What? And then this all happened and then I like looked and I saw there was a flower and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I like ran inside and I like went to tell Davy. And then I like immediately went and like wrote it down. I was like, this is how I feel. I just saw this flower and I didn't think there was going to be a flower and it's so cool. But for the image of the gown in particular, when I went back to try to play with shaping this poem after just like putting the initial feelings down, I kept going back to like playing with personifying these plants in the gardens as sort of like people and characters that have, been like out partying or something, and now they're like hungover and tired, and but that there was this life, this energy, this beauty that was so dressed in the most kind of extravagant, elegant, sort of perfect clothing that, I in my mind it was like, oh, this is this green gown and it has like this jewel on it. Anyway, so that's kind of how all of these images came together, and kind of letting my imagination sort of play with this moment in time that for me is like, again, this very novice gardener was like, oh my gosh.
I just really love the personification throughout the entire poem because you use a lot of vocabulary that, normally we use for people, such as I really love the hungover sort of notion that the plants were kind of droopy and, the garden wasn't looking at its best because probably they
No.
were like a bit tired. But among these sort of tired plants, it sprang this blossoming beautiful flower that you described, and it's just I really love the ending as well because it really makes me feel like I'm in the moment, like I'm really in your head, discovering this blossoming, and it's just like a little kid getting very excited for something
Yeah.
so pure and so small and little, which is just a flower, but it's just so exciting to see it grow and that you took care of it for so many months and it's finally, um, blooming. So it's I really think the way the voice that you have throughout this poem, it just really it just really connects with myself. It's really good. I loved it.
You. Yeah, it was a really fun one to write. And it was also, as far as the form, this is a poem that takes up a lot of the page. And I did kind of want to try to capture this kind of sprawling garden, and kind of the extravagance, the aliveness, the fullness, of at least the feeling of discovering that morning glory flower.
Mm, mm, mm. I really loved it. It's definitely, I can see why it's in the first section of inhaling. It's sort of like inhaling the beauty of
Yes.
this nature, of life, as well for the little blossoming flower. It's receiving its first kind of rays of sun, and yeah, it's really
Yeah,
nice. I loved it. Wonderful. And so, maybe we can go to the second poem.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
fantastic.
So the second poem I wanted to read is from the second part of the book, Hold. And this is actually the second to last poem in that section. And I feel a kind of kindredness to you in this poem because the Poetry Lighthouse published this poem initially before it came out in the book. And this poem was really important for me to write because, as I mentioned before, this is a poem that really is about a moment where I experienced a real peace after a lot of this sort of hold, kind of darkness, fear, kind of crippling grief. And this is a poem that in many ways is kind of the most real example for me of a poem that felt like a gift, that was just sort of, I was receiving and feeling very connected to this friend who had died, but who felt very alive, and her message came through very clear to me in a way that offered a lot of um, kind of healing and closure that I needed at the time. This poem is called I Am Safe, I Am Free. I drop my body into the bath, salt water, blankets, the heartache. The burden of being begins to soften as breath becomes the balm. Then you arrive. 8 years after your body died, invisible angel, you visit me in silence and you say, I am safe. I am free. You have permission to release the pain of your grief. Change your missing me into loving me and loving all that you love.
Oh, that was so beautiful. I I seriously don't even know how to begin with this poem. It starts sort of like, just describing how, you're I suppose I guess you're in the bath and you have normally taking a bath is thing you do to relax sometimes. And I really love how you start meditating about, as you said, the feelings of grief that you're feeling for someone. And by the end of this poem, to turn that grief into love is,
Mm.
I think it's very powerful. And I think the way it sort of sounds like the spirit of this person that is now that had departed is now calling you out and telling you not to worry and that it's all going to be okay. And that is so tender because it's sort of like speaking with a heavenly body. And I think a lot of people might be able to get a lot from this poem, very helpful things, especially when they're dealing with grief, because it could last for a very long time. And sometimes what those people who have, you know, um, passed away want is for us to be happy, and that is the end point. So, of course, it's important to grieve, but eventually, we the bereaved, it's our duty as well to get over it, for us to be happy again, because that's what the person who just departed would have wanted us to be. So um, I thought, I mean, I think that's the reflection behind it. Um, but I think you really sort of, I think it's really beautiful the fact that you, um, how can I say it, like engraved the the memory of this person that you love in a poem, and you made it evergreen. You made it eternal so that this person will live in your poem forever. Like that is the voice of the person that you're missing, and in a way, you are giving her a voice through your poem. So I think that's very beautiful. So yeah, that's lovely.
Everything you're saying to me is really beautiful, and I really appreciate your reflections on it. And I do feel like this is a poem that has helped me to remember um, the way in which grief and love are really intermingled, and since the experience of this grief, I have you know continued to live through other losses, and I feel like this poem is just really a reminder that no matter how tragic a death is, or how short a life is, or also if a life before a death had a lot of tragedy in it, and there was just a lot of pain that happened in the life too. The overarching and sort of, undercurrent in the midst of the pain is this love. And sort of for me, the the experience of love is always more creative and more resourceful and more potent than pain. And I think for me, that's kind of what my faith is, what my sort of spiritual orientation is. And this having this very particular moment in time in a bathtub and feeling very connected to this particular person allowed me to then be able to kind of map those particulars of that experience onto other experiences. And certainly my hope is that this is a poem that will find the people who need it at a particular point in time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope that a lot of people are able to connect with this poem specifically, and well, with the rest of the poems as well. Well, I think, and I think reading poetry, in a way, it's like therapy, like going to therapy. You might need it for different, um, you know, phases in your life. Maybe in a phase in your life you need a certain type of poetry, and in another ones you need when you're grieving. There's always a good poem out there for
Yeah,
every
yeah.
situation in life.
Poetry is as medicine and kind of finding the right prescription at the right
Yeah.
time. The other thing I want to say about this poem that kind of speaks to, the process of writing a poem that can be, kind of mysterious and surprising is that, you know, I'm writing about an experience where I'm getting clarity and receiving this knowing from a friend who is on the other side that she is safe and she is free. And yet, when I was writing the poem, it was important that I was writing from her perspective. So she is saying, I am safe, I am free. And then, when I was wanting to find the right title for the poem, the words, I am safe, I am free, felt really important to be the title. And then it was kind of a connection for me of like, oh, so this deep knowing that someone who has passed on is safe and free can be a reminder to me that I Claire, or whoever is alive reading this poem is also safe and free, knowing that, this um someone who has been through a tragic death is safe and free, then I can be and know I am safe and free and connect to that place inside of myself too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love this poem. It's one of my favorites. So why don't we go back into again something a bit um about nature, and we go for the last poem, which is Wild Poetry, which is a very interesting title, by the way. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Perfect.
Wild poetry. The warthog, elephant, and tawny eagle shared their traits in rhyme and verse for my third grade African animal report. Maybe Miss Buttons hated poetry? She scrawled incorrect formatting in scarlet ink below the unfathomable F. Squeezing back tears, I stuffed my failure to the back of my binder, my imagination to the corner cubby of my brain. And with each passing grade, I learned the right way to format the paper and score the A. The animals stayed locked in their cage, bound to the rubric I forced 5 paragraphs into essays. I climbed and climbed the ladder of success to win the high score on the standardized test, up the wall of the ivy until the poison of perfection almost ate me alive. Down, down, down I fell into a well of weakness and woe, where I drowned in dreams of rumbling red African sunsets, burning my suburban ambitions with the fire of savannah yearnings. In the dark of the depth, I claimed the breath of pain, the pulse of spirit. The incorrect creatures, no longer bound, trampled me with grace. The warthog rolled me with glee in the grime as the elephant blared my initiation song. The third grade girl inside cried ancient rivers while the eagle cooed, stroking my tangles with tawny wings. In the spirals of time, my tears became a solvent for my shame. First clawing, then crawling, then pouncing past boulders of presumptions, pressures, soul paralysis. I rewrote paragraphs of failure into poetry of wildness. Tonight, my creatures howl and prance unbound beneath the baobab trees, the eternal sky broken open from doming black by starry bodies, fierce and free in verse.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for reading it. It's a bit longer than the other ones, but every section of it, it's sort of like a little like a short story that goes, have a beginning, then it has the how it evolves, and then the climax and everything. And this is the type of poem that I needed when I was a student. I think this would have been so helpful to be less harsh on myself, um, because it really, I feel that this poem talks a lot about what other people think of our work and how things should be, and how they think that everything has like a pattern, a format. Um, when I started university as well, teachers were very strict and very scrupulous when it came to the whole how to write an essay, how to, it has to have this and that. And if it doesn't, then it lowered the grade. Even if I tried to have like this kind of very fancy titles that were very outlandish, my teachers hated it, and they were like, no, it has to be very straightforward, it has to be very serious. Um, and so it kind of killed my creativity a little bit. And I can feel that in the poem as well. I think you are reflecting from an experience perhaps that happened to you. And it's very common that these kind of instances happen in academia and in the whole educational system. It tends to be a bit anti-creativity, because they're trying to have this structure of the classroom, of how to grade them, and also the way we sort of uh, devalue or underestimate our intellect according to what we're marked upon. So if
Yeah.
we've got, we kind of measure our value through this ABCDF system of grading, especially, which is wrong, especially in creative writing, I dare say, because when it comes to something creative, it's really something personal that comes from the heart. So it should be taken more subjectively. It's not something that
Right.
you can really mark,
Yes.
because it did not perhaps touch your teacher's heart, but that was her experience with the poem, which is not the same the one that you had, and the same that other person might have with your poem. So I'm very curious to know if this was based on a real story.
Yeah. So, like many poems in this book, this is very much based on um an an internal experience, a feeling that is connected to a real story. So the facts of this basically, like, the details in this poem are not factually based entirely. For example, I did not actually get an F on a report in 3rd grade. But I did have this experience where I had, turned in, it actually was an African animal report, and I had done, like, the formatting all wrong. I'd, like, put all these little letters from animals that were very sort of, like, poetic into envelopes, and they were, like, stamped from the animals, and the teacher gave me a B minus on this. This is the fact. And the reason this poem came to life for me is because, sort of in reflecting back and kind of looking at my experience up to this point of sort of understanding myself as a creative being, and also someone who has um, lived in a society and a culture that really values these kind of external achievement markers. I was able to see that a B minus for me as a little, already perfectionist 3rd grader felt like an F. That was the feeling of it. And I remember being so devastated when I got that grade back, and feeling like this kind of creative um process and product that I shared with this teacher was not received in the way that I hoped, and kind of just thought, assumed, like, I thought it was like this awesome project. Also, to be fair, I did not, this is not my actual 3rd grade teacher's name, and she was not a bad teacher. There were many ways that she, like, really helped me with my creative writing. So, I think it is really important anytime I'm trying to remember when I'm reading a poem, I'm not reading a poem from, like, this is an autobiography standpoint. It's like we as poets are using, or certainly I am using my imagination, using metaphor, using hyperbole to capture a feeling, to capture an internal experience, kind of like a myth. It's like, how do you speak to this human reality that's unseen but that's very powerful? And in many ways, the images of Africa and African animals, and the Serengeti, really, for me, represent this real freedom and this connection to aliveness and to being on earth that's very kind of magical. And I was, like, really, really into Africa when I was in high school. And I went to Tanzania when I was in 12th grade, and I went on a safari and worked in, like, a school for a few weeks. And I always felt, and I certainly felt this when I was in Tanzania, that there was I mean, the origin of life began in Africa. There's, like, this rootedness, this connection to, again, like, aliveness and wildness in ways that are suburban, or kind of more like, buttoned up culture, really worried about, like, having everything look perfect and good, kind of denies or pushes away or undervalues. And also in the world of literature and poetry, I think there's a lot of kind of this should mindset, and, like, a poem needs to be a certain way, and poets need to have certain degrees, or poets, have to kind of, like, present in these serious, sophisticated ways, or whatever. And this poem was really a way for me to play with all of these kind of constructs that I found were not life-giving, and to try to reclaim these life-giving elements of my own imagination, and nature, like, the everything that is not human that's alive kind of has to teach us as humans. So, yeah, this poem was really fun to write, and I feel a real sort of connection to this poem, because I think in many ways it speaks to a lot of what the book is about, is kind of this reclaiming of beauty, this reclaiming this connection to this life force, this breath, and trying to let go of the patterning of being good and right and doing what, society says is like the perfect thing to do.
Yeah, I thank you so much for that answer. I think you really covered everything that this poem encapsulates and sort of wants to give away to the reader. And also, I noticed that even the structure of this poem is a bit wild.
Ah,
You kind of jump
thank you.
around a little bit. You change structure every now and then. You do like the little stairs, kind of, and it changes as you go, as you read. It changes as as if um sort of like at the beginning, you're kind of restrained because of what the teacher said and your F that you get from your piece of writing. And then you start to discover that, no, actually, it's really nice to have this individual creative part of me that I want to explore. And you start, kind of going, outside of the box and sort of exploring the different facets of your imagination, sort of like the African animals and all this imagery, which I really think speaks to, as you said, the wildness and to be in touch with nature, which, if you think about it, has nothing to do with structures. If you go into the wild, there's no structures. It's a mess. It's wild, and that's life. It's wild. It's not that structured. So I think that's a very beautiful way of encompassing all that has to do with the live experience into and transformed into an analogy or a story about writing poetry. I think
Yeah.
that's fantastic. And so thank you very much for your readings. That was those three. I'm really glad you picked those three poems because those were some of my favorites when I was reading your poetry collection. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to review your poetry collection, which
Thank you for doing it. It meant so much to me.
I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's a wonderful work, and then, you spent a lot of years, and it's built up to this point when you finally can hold it in your hands and share it with the world. And it's something very courageous and very um, amazing thing to do, um, because it's kind of an intimate work. All of these kind of poetry is always very personal and intimate, and
Mhm.
so when you put it out there to the world to read, it just feels like a lot of people can connect with it as well. And it's so beautiful. It's brave, but also, I guess, liberating, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are times where it's like, oh my God, this feels so excruciatingly vulnerable. Why am I doing this? Um, but the overarching theme has been very liberating and connecting. And, I mean, I I have worked as a therapist and I've had the privilege of being with people in their most vulnerable, intimate experiences and their most excruciating pain. And I think it's just such the reality that no matter who we are, we all know pain, we all know vulnerability, and it comes in all sorts of different flavors and iterations. But it felt like the true helpful to myself action to take to kind of allow these poems and this book to be out in the world. And it's certainly been a learning curve and had, sort of high highs and low lows. And ultimately, I mean, seriously, Erwin, it's like connections like this they've been really a gift to me. And I've just really appreciated the Poetry Lighthouse and like the reading a couple months ago and being with these other poets who are just like really wonderful artists and just people who, even just in these brief connections of reading their work or hearing their work who, I experienced to be very like wise curious, seeking humans. It's those sort of connections I feel deeply grateful for.
Really glad, because that is exactly why I started, the Poetry Lighthouse. It needs to build this community of people who share not necessarily the same values, but who share this passion for the expression of human life, and who want to share it,
Yeah.
who want to play with it, to share it, to create with it, and see where it goes. And for anyone who would like to get a copy of your wonderful poetry collection, where could they find it?
Yes, so it is on bookshop.org, Amazon, and you can also get it directly from the publisher, Kelsey Books. So, and it's also on my website too. The purchasing options are, it's just www.clairecoenen.com.
Perfect. I will put the links in the description box as well, just to make sure it's all very easily accessible. So thank you so much for coming here today for this podcast. It was a real pleasure listening to your poems and your life experience, as well as you came to write your poetry collection.
Thank you, Erwin. It's really been an honor and a delight.
Thank you for listening to the Poetry Lighthouse. If you liked this episode, don't forget to share and subscribe to our podcast. You can also visit our website, thepoetrylighthouse.com, where you can read and submit your works of poetry and short stories. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram to keep updated. This is the end of the episode. Thanks again, and see you next time.